Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reddit Roast number 40. Mal, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So, Reddit Roast number 40, we have got a few classic questions today that, like, kind of questions that come up again and again and again, and unusual profile, kind of unique aspects, which we keep hearing questions about. So, it's quite an interesting batch to cover. For example, one person who has a master's in management and is wondering whether they can do an MBA afterwards. That's a classic query. We have somebody who's considering an entrepreneurial venture, but is worried that it might fail. And would a failed entrepreneurial venture actually be a negative for their MBA profile? We'll talk about that. We have somebody whose recommender messed up, submitted the wrong LOR to the wrong school. Is that the
Mhm.
end of their application chances, or have they still got a shot? We'll talk about all of these today. Right, Mal, should we dive into the first profile?
Yes, our first profile for 2026. All right, M7 with an entrepreneurship background, international applicant, a URM, 25 male, GRE 334,
Hmm.
3.5 GPA in finance. GPA justification, I think OP thinks their GPA is quite low. They say that there's no reasons for low grades and bad semesters, but can demonstrate strong maturity and improvement, speaks four languages, studying English and math grad courses, and also writing the CFA level 3 in Feb. Experience one year as an analyst at a top PE buyout firm, 2 years as an associate at a large corp dev working on country level strategic initiatives and media acquisitions. Now I want to leave my company to build a SaaS product. I have a business plan, but I am worried that a failed startup could hurt my MBA application. We'll talk about that. I see a few questions there as well, quite detailed. What do
Mhm.
you think in general, though, of OP's profile?
Yeah, let's talk about it academically first. So 3.5 GPA is okay. It's it's 3.6 is roughly the average for M7, so he's kind of in the right place. CFA 1 and 2 also helps. I assume if he's taking 3, then he has CFA level 1 and 2 already. Those will be nice. The university brand, it's a strong university. We don't know how strong, but that's also a positive on the academic side. And then this upward trend is interesting. We'll talk a little bit about whether OP should write a optional essay or not, but that's typically where you would mention it. 334, absolutely fantastic GRE score. That Q170 is the top possible quant score. So really, really strong GRE. In terms of demographic, I mean, it just says URM international. Like, I'll take your word for it. Just because you're international does not make you URM necessarily. For example, the most overrepresented group is Indian males, and they are international. So that doesn't necessarily mean URM, but right, we'll take OP's word for it. Extracurricular. I'm not seeing any mention of any extracurriculars really here. So that might be a red flag. We'll maybe give them the benefit of the doubt on that. But also, like, top P buyout firm associate, like OP has very clearly been focusing on busting a nut for finance employers. They might just not have any extracurriculars. It's very, very possible. Professional, like, P is appreciated, especially the top buyout firm will probably, that's obviously a great name. But I don't see any promotions at the moment. Well, actually, there is a kind of a promotion in that move, right? From analyst to associate. It looks like OP moved to get the promotion. Still, it's one promotion. It came via the move. TB, yeah, a bit of a question mark over whether he'll get the credibility, the credit there for the promotion. Probably will. Overall, look, a strong profile. Bit of a pink flag around the extracurriculars. And
Mhm.
as we're going to get to, maybe a bit of a pink flag around the motivations as well. That's something that OP has asked about here in this bullet point. So let's get into it.
Okay. So OP's questions, so the first one is about a failed startup. So OP is already kind of scared that it doesn't work out and OP ends up unemployed. So
Mhm.
would a failed startup hurt the M7, especially the Harvard Stanford Wharton chances, and how difficult is it to pivot back to middle market PE,
Mhm.
IB or MBB post MBA?
Yeah, okay. So there's a couple of questions. There's obviously two questions in here. The first thing is around the failed startup. Now, this will not negatively affect OP. The failed startup will be treated, if it fails, it'll be treated as an interesting learning experience. especially if OP can mention like a leadership story in the Harvard essay, or it'll also give OP, if it did fail, it would give OP great material for a failure question in an interview. So I don't really see any world where the startup is going to be negative for OP's chances of the MBA. We've had several people who worked in big tech, several clients who've worked in big tech and started tech ventures that have failed or at least plateaued, not done great. And they've used those as great fodder, great material for the application essays. So part one question is, I'm not worried at all about the startup failing and hurting the chances. It could even make it stronger if there's some good essays that come out of it. My question, the only kind of the negative side of this is, do you really need an MBA if you're going to leave your company and build a SaaS product? Like, to me, it sounds like a route that does not necessarily need an MBA. Plenty of people have built SaaS products without an MBA. Why would you? I know it's pre-MBA goal, it's pre-MBA plan, but still, it's starting to paint a picture of a career that doesn't necessarily need an MBA. If OP's career is going to be focused around building SaaS products, there's a bit of a question mark in there around goals and motivation, which must be clarified in the application if OP is going to get into particularly HSW. So that's probably my main answer. I think in terms of part two, how difficult is it to pivot back to PE and IB? PE and IB would be doable because you already have the experience from any M7 going back. If you've got IBP experience, pivoting back into your former industry is, a classic post-MBA move and would not be an issue. Consulting, I'm not so sure about. Like, consulting is a different industry entirely, and then you would, if you wrote about MBB as your goals, you'd be saying, I've worked at a PE firm and at a large corp dev and built a SaaS, and now I want to go to MBB. To me, that is just a far too scattered story. But the first two, a middle market PE or IB, that would be a credible post-MBA goal and would be very doable with pretty much any M7 MBA.
All right. And what are the main gaps in OP's profile that he can work on until he applies, which is in most likely in 2 years?
Yeah, so that's 2 years is quite a big stretch to be. You can do quite a lot in 2 years in terms of filling gaps. The first one is extracurriculars, as I mentioned in my breakdown, in my walkthrough. It's a pretty classic like finance problem to not have any extracurriculars. We see this all the time. You've got 2 years, start something. What does that mean? So either formalize something you're already doing and make it an formal extracurricular. For example, if you're already like helping people with their career, with their writing their resumes and doing some informal career counseling, turn that into a thing. Build a website, make a title for yourself. All of a sudden, you're founder of a career advisory company, and that can be framed as a really good extracurricular. So OP needs an extracurricular to differentiate himself from the finance bros. And that 2 years is a great time to be doing that. That's the main thing. GRE is already in a good spot. GPA is solid. If you can get the CFA, it won't do any harm either. Sounds like OP's can be working on that anyway. So extracurriculars is the big one.
All right. And OP's last question is, you did mention a bit of a scattered story there if OP chooses MBB. So OP is asking about, could this dispersion across tech, economics, strategy, finance, entrepreneurship harm his profile? Will they see it as scattered? I have clear long-term goals, very ambitious, and they may not work out, but I'm trying, and I can justify why I'm learning AI and languages and why I moved from PE to a media-focused corp dev role.
Yeah. Okay. The short answer is yes. The dispersion across industries can be a negative, but only if you don't manage it properly. Okay. So if, for example, if you put a goal of going to MBB after the MBA, that adds yet another layer. You haven't mentioned consulting in this list. That would add consulting. So all of a sudden you'd be scattered across 6 industries. That's obviously too much. But if your goals are aligned with something you've already done, that kind of reduces it. If your SaaS product is in an area that you've already got professional experience in, then that kind of rolls into one and that kind of combines. And basically, as long as they can see a common thread between these dispersion, between these scattered industries, then you're going to be okay. Minimize them and find a common thread. What could a common thread look like? So, for example, in each of the roles so far, my responsibility has been to step back and see the bigger picture. That's a common thread that you can use to kind of to tie in lots of different industries. Another one could be all of the different work I've done, whether it's in tech, whether it's in finance, has all been to do with helping some underprivileged group of people within my little country. Again, that's the common thread. So if OP can find a common thread and keep those post MBA goals kind of tightly linked to what he's already been doing, then there's not a problem. But if OP starts going off on tangents everywhere, and post MBA goal is MBB, the SARS is completely unrelated to anything he's been doing already, like there's going to be too much scattered, and it's going to too much scattering, too much diversity in there in the career, and that's going to be seen as somebody who doesn't really know what they care about, what they're interested in, and those people tend not to be very successful in MBA applications.
Okay. All right. I think that answers all of OP's questions.
Cool. Should have a quick look through the comments. It looks like
I love the first one.
The first one.
Like you're kidding about those grades or you're really underestimating yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a positive comment for sure. Someone's used AI to write their comment here. And then, yeah, this is another positive comment as well. So it looks like a fairly supportive Reddit there. I think, yeah, overall a strong profile. Just keep that narrative condensed. Keep that story tight. Don't go. You've got 2 years. Don't diversify and add yet another industry if you can avoid it.
Cool. Okay.
All right. Should we do the next profile?
Yes, let's go.
All right.
Profile number 2. Chances of MIT and Ivy League's MBA. All right. So applying in round 1, 2026. And do I have a realistic shot at any Ivy League MBA or MIT Sloan? Background Indian, but living in Canada since 2019. Currently doing a BBA in accounting. So OP is studying at the moment, expected to graduate in August this year. Previously did an advanced diploma in accounting in 21 and then worked full-time for 3 years. GRE 326, even quant and verbal split, 3 years in full-time operations and supply chain experience at Walmart, Canada. Roles across distribution, transportation, routing, training, operations, supervision. I also see quite a few certifications there, Lean Six Sigma, Black Belt, loads, supply chain professional, global supply chain management master certification from Michigan State, entrepreneurship certification as well from HBS online, few others from various Ivy League schools online. Goals, short-term, operations, supply chain strategy at Amazon, Walmart, Global Ops Consulting. Long-term, senior operations leadership or large-scale entrepreneurship in logistics, agriculture, or infrastructure. Target schools, Harvard, MIT, Wharton, Yale, and Ross. What's your take on OP's profile?
Yeah, okay. Let's go academic first. So the big thing is this lack of undergrad at the moment is going to be a problem. Yeah. OP does not yet have an undergraduate degree, a bachelor's degree. Is taking it and is expected to graduate in August 2026. But that is going to be the main factor as to whether OP can justify an application this year. I guess we're going to talk about that in detail, but academic wise, we don't have a GPA yet. It's going to be important. That's probably the big factor. GRE is 326. It's not bad. It's not really Harvard and MIT level, especially the quant. So not ideal on the academic front. Demographic, Indian in Canada is very much ORM. And then in terms of extracurriculars, loads and loads of certifications, which I guess you could treat as extracurriculars because they're kind of going on in the background outside of the day job, but they're not exactly community building. So there's a bit of a gap there. So kind of 50-50 on the extracurriculars. Professional. Now, work experience is good. Logistics and and just this theme in general is something that they really, really like. The retail sector is relatively underrepresented in MBA world. So that is overall, a good professional perspective. We had a client from a couple of years ago who got into HBS from Wayfair, for example. So it's a good. I definitely like that. It's probably the strength. In terms of goals, yeah, these make a lot of sense, right? These are operations focused goals. Amazon is typically considered like best in class in that space. Walmart is obviously gigantic as well. So I like the goals. I think they make perfect sense. So overall, I'm not seeing Harvard and MIT at the moment with this profile, but the Yales and the Michigan Rosses and maybe the bottom of the M7 perhaps on the cards if OP can get that GRE score up. The rest will depend on the GPA as well.
Okay. And considering OP is graduating in August 26,
Hmm.
they're asking whether they should apply in round one next this year.
Yeah, okay. Yes, because round one is nice, assuming OP has I think it's his. Do we
The not certified, no.
assuming he has his grades and transcript from this bachelor's degree.
Mm.
I'm just gonna why I'm laboring this point. Let me show you MIT's just as a sort of case study on this. If I go to MIT, this is their like frequently asked questions for the MBA program. And if I go down to work experience and background in the FAQs, you will see that they ask this question here. Let me move this a little bit. They ask this question. There is this question around under the work experience and background. They ask, is there any preparation or prerequisites that I should take before enrolling? Blah, blah, blah. What if I have no experience? Literally, they could not be any clearer. The only prerequisite is you have a bachelor's degree. The
Mm.
only prerequisite is you must have a bachelor's degree. So that is going to be absolutely key. If OP can get the transcript and the grades and doesn't have to resit any classes, etc., done and dusted by the time he hits submit in round one 2026, i.e. September, which is cutting it pretty tight, right? Going from graduating in August through to hitting September, submitting like September 5th or so, that's going to be really, really tight. But if OP can do it, yes, shoot for round one, because round one is advantageous generally. We talk about this all the time. 4 years of work experience, OP will be right. So this will be 3 years now, presumably hitting submit in September will mean they have about 4 years of work experience come matriculation. So that's the perfect time to be applying for MBAs as well. The only other thing I would say, and we'll talk about this a bit more, is building into the equation, maybe taking the GRE again. And so does
Mhm.
that timeline work? Can OP make that timeline work? Yeah. If yes, then yes, apply in round one.
Okay. And OP's other question is, with their current profile, is there a realistic shot at any Ivy League MBA? I assume will be seven or MIT Sloan.
Yeah. So just for context, in business school world, we tend to talk about M7s as the kind of equivalent of Ivy League because there's several Ivy schools that don't actually have like top business schools. So there's a bit of a distinction there. So in the M7, um, I think, look, worth a try to apply to M7s with an improved profile.
Mm.
Given that OP is thinking about round 126, has between now and September 9 months, then yes, if the first if. So this kind of eats into the next question, which is like, what can OP do to strengthen their profile? Let's talk about that. So yes, apply to the bottom end of M7 if one, take the GRE again.
Mhm.
Particularly the quant score is not high enough for the top programs like MIT, Sloan, like HBS, like Wharton. That's going to need to be higher as an Indian applicant, especially. Going to have that quant score higher. One. Two, complete the bachelor's. That's going to
Mhm.
be, as we've talked about, absolutely critical, and complete it with a good GPA. 3.6 is the average of the M7 schools. You want to be in or above the average, at or above the average to be credible. And then finally, OP has lots of credentials, but nothing I'm seeing extracurricular wise that has like community building as part of it. And that is the other key thing that OP is missing, and has 9 months to do that. Just like I said in the last roast, what does that look like? Formalize something you're already doing outside of work, turn it into a thing, build a website, get a formal title, give yourself an extracurricular that you can write about and talk about in your interviews. And with all of those boxes ticked, I think OP could have a chance at M7, but it's quite a big if.
Mhm. All right. Okay. Thanks for your read on that profile,
Cool.
Sam. Are you ready for profile three?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. M7 Reapplicant. Now, this is a 29-year-old female reapplicant, Middle Eastern, 6.5 years of experience in transaction services in Big Four across North America, Europe, and the Middle East, associate director at Big Four, board member and CFO of a charity with 100K in annual surplus, academics, BA in finance from a top 200 university, GPA 3.3, GRE 318, which has been improved from 307, and a GMAT score of 580 in the previous cycle. Post MBA goals: short term investment banking, long term infrastructure finance. OP says that I've tried both GMAT and GRE for a while. My scores haven't crossed the average for most M7 programs. Was also waitlisted by MIT the last time she applied, and interviewed by Booth in the 24-25 cycle, and got rejections from the remaining 5 M7s. What's your take on her profile as a reapplicant?
Sure. Let's discuss this academically first. Academically, not ideal. We have a 3.3 GPA. Meh.
Mm-hmm.
We have a that's there. We have from a top 200 university. Is that a good thing? I'm not sure if top 200 is much to brag about. And then the 318, an improvement, but still pretty meh, especially the quant score below 160. So academically, not ideal at all, being polite. Demographic, Middle Eastern female is certainly URM. So that's a pro. Extracurriculars, board member at a charity. Here, this board member and CFO of a serious charity this is really strong extracurricular work, really impressive stuff. And then professional, like this is the big strength, an associate director at a big four. Now, I'm not necessarily seeing, then OP hasn't specified promotions, but if they've been at associate this big four for a while, it sounds like there's probably been a few promotions in there. And also, I suspect there is some direct leadership responsibility as an associate director. In other words, supervising and managing people. That is also a big plus for OP, assuming that's the case. So great professional. Now, goals. Investment banking and infrastructure finance. It's interesting. I'm seeing a lot of infrastructure finance goals this round. I'm not sure exactly what's driving it. I think it's becoming one of the new sexy sectors that people are aiming for. Wasn't a few years ago. It's really arguably quite dry work, but whatever. A lot of people are wanting to do that at the moment. But look, OP is credibly positioned to apply to those. So what I always say is investment banking as a goal, it works if you've already got hardcore finance experience. A lot of people we see in not particularly serious industries thinking, I want to make some money, so I'm going to put IB as my post MBA goals, and they haven't got the hardcore finance experience for it, and it's not a credible goal. OP has been working in transaction services for Big Four. This is a classic pre MBA role to break into IB. So I really like those goals, basically. And then on the infrastructure finance side, there's probably a narrative there. A lot of Middle Eastern countries are actively building out their infrastructure. And as a Middle Eastern applicant wanting to go to infrastructure finance, there's a narrative there taking shape as well. So I really, really like that. And I think the goals are like don't touch them. They're really, really nice. So the overall profile then: pros, the demographic and the professional experience combined with goals. The cons are the academics and the the pros also extracurriculars. This was excellent. The cons is the academics, and that's the end of it. That's the only con here.
Okay, and so given that that analysis, what are OP's chances at M7 for round two? OP's applying right now.
Yeah. Look, the big question this comes down to is that a big enough increase on the GRE? Is that a big enough increase on the GRE or not? For context, I'm doing this on the fly here, so bear with me. I'm on my conversion table, and I'm seeing that a 580 GMAT, which she applied with last time, is equivalent to about a 157, 156 GRE. And OP's gone up by about 4 points in the current in the new with the new test. So the question is, if OP got interviews at Booth last time, is that a big enough increase to A, convert interviews into a full-time offer, and B, get a few more interviews from a few more M7s? Look, I definitely think it's worth a shot, but it's definitely not a shoe-in with that score, which is still, you know, quite
Mhm.
far below the M7 average.
Okay. And so what else do you think then OP can do at this stage to strengthen her application?
Depends how many times they've done the GRE. I'd like a higher GRE score again. I know that's a big improvement, and OP is probably sick of the GRE, but I'd like to see that north of 320, really. And OP has time now. Well, actually, no. In round two, OP doesn't have time. So sorry, I take that back. I think worth a shot because of the improvement, but it's not a shoe in. And actually, given that we're the 2nd of Jan, whatever I say now is irrelevant because OP should have submitted the applications by now. But I think OP may be slightly improved. Also, it depends what else has changed. If it's just the GRE that's changed, that's one thing. But if OP has maybe, for example, been promoted since that last application, then there's a big improvement and the chances are higher. Maybe OP has started taking on management responsibility and has written about that in the Reapplicant essay, also a much, much stronger profile. So really, it'll come down to what's changed besides the GRE. Possible, definitely throw in the application, but no guarantees.
Do you think OP should cast a wider net, like apply to more schools, perhaps in the next round one
Yeah.
next year?
Yeah, I mean, if OP is dinged again by the M7s, then definitely has to start considering the next tier down, the T10s, basically, the Yales of the world, right? These are still Ivy League schools, the Cornells of the world. These are still Ivy League, but they're not M7, and
Mhm.
those would be sort of where I would be looking for the next round if OP is unsuccessful this time. Being reapplicant a third, reapplicants get admitted, but a third time round,
Yeah.
that's a long shot.
All right. Okay. Should we move on to our final profile for the day then, Sam?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. This is a Swiss consultant. I've been considering the possibility of an MBA and have been lurking on this sub for a while. We've
Welcome.
been lurking for a long time now. But the more I read, the more uncertain I become about whether an MBA actually makes sense for me. Born and raised in Switzerland, but not sure whether it's a better place to work than the US or other financial hubs like Singapore. At the same time, my background doesn't fit the typical high finance profile, as I needed to maintain steady income throughout my studies. Some additional background below: Swiss male, 26 years old, planning to complete the CFA within the next 2 years. Lots of CFA applicants, I think we've seen this roast. BSc in Business Administration from a Swiss university with a grade
Mhm.
roughly equivalent to a 3.9 GPA, a master's in General Management from Switzerland's top business school with a grade roughly equivalent to a 3.7 GPA, one
Mhm.
exchange semester in New Zealand, no internships. Approximately 2 years of experience as a working student in industry and in financial services audit. Currently working as an analyst at Accenture in finance and risk consulting. Um, yeah, formerly industry agnostic. Took the GMAT
Okay.
once with only 1 month of prep. Practice tests were around 720, but officially OP scored 690 due to stress related to technical issues. Open to working abroad, strong
Mhm.
interest in asset management, private equity, venture capital, and MBB consulting. Yeah, what OP does realize that his background is different. It's quite non-traditional. So yeah, what do you think about it?
Look, I'm gonna do the evaluation, but there's a massive caveat here, which I'll mention at the end. Big one. That's going to be a problem. Okay, so look, 3.9 GPA of the undergrad is strong, definitely. The exchange abroad is interesting as well.
Mhm.
Swiss is an underrepresented nationality for certain at business schools in America in particular. Extracurriculars not specified might be a gap.
Mhm.
And particularly because Europe doesn't have the same culture around doing extracurriculars for academic purposes. So it's possible that there's really not much there. OP's been focusing on grades and studies and maybe doesn't have any ECs. Professional, 2 years working as a sort of 2 years of experience as a working student is not enough yet. It's solid, but it's not enough yet. So that's going to be an issue. But the big one is this: having a master's in management,
Mm.
particularly a good one from Switzerland's top business school, this is a big problem for top MBA programs. You already have a master's in management. An MBA is a master's in business administration. You already have a master's in management. These are very, very similar degrees. So what I would, and what I'm going to do just to sort of build on this is I want to show you a new offering by LBS, which is this. I'm going to have to adjust my screen a little bit to show you everything. The LBS have just created a new 1 year MBA specifically tailored to MIM graduates. Why? Because an MBA is not suited to MIM graduates, and MIM graduates have a difficult time in MBA applications because they've already covered most of the material. So why would if you've already studied all the things that covered in a business school curriculum, why do you need to go through it all again? You don't. So I don't think OP's in a good spot for MBA programs as things stand, unless that he focuses on programs that are specifically tailored to masters in management students, mainly the 1 year MBA programs like this one by LBS. I'm pretty sure Kellogg have one similar. You could put a credible application to like a tech MBA. That's a 1 year program, but basically a full-time MBA program is going to look at that master's in management and think, hey, you've already studied this stuff. I don't think you're going to be getting that much out of the program. Excuse me, that was a sneeze, but I caught my microphone in time.
Oh,
So, chances of M7, unless it's the
yeah.
kind of 1 year program, for example, I don't think are in a great place.
Okay. And what about OP's background being different from a typical MBA candidate? What can he do besides?
Yeah. Look, if I was in OP's shoes, I right now I'd be focusing on work, getting the full-time work experience under your belt. You've already got your master's in management. Um, you've sort of disqualified yourself for an MBA. Just get the work experience under your belt. If you want to make a career pivot, do it organically. Do it by
Mhm.
showing progression in the industry you've chosen, move jobs when the opportunity comes up, and pivot to the career that you like organically. OP is in a great position to, Swiss based, considering the US and Singapore, and already has a great master's in management from Switzerland's top business school. I would say OP, focus on your career right now. And if you're in finance already, these industries would be within grasp after a couple of years of hard work. MBB consulting, not so much, but PEVC, asset management, that's something you can do already without an MBA. So crack on.
Okay. All right. And that was all of our profiles for the day. Are we ready for our bonus question today?
Yes, we are.
And
Recommend
this
is messed
is
up.
an interesting one. Yeah, recommend a messed up. Now, this is something that's out of an applicant's control, so quite an interesting dilemma. All the business schools I'm applying to ask the same GMAT questions, except Kellogg, which has one additional. I shared the guidance with my recommender, pointed out the three common GMAT questions, plus the additional one for Kellogg, and I mentioned that it applies only for Kellogg. But He answered all 4 questions in one doc and submitted the same letter to all schools without removing the Kellogg specific questions. Is this a big deal? Would admissions committees be understanding of this predicament? The letter itself is very strong, and my recommender is very senior, a well-known entrepreneur in my country whom I worked closely with, but he is extremely busy and at times inattentive. And I'm sure this isn't the first time this has happened. So what do you think about this little
I love
problem?
this. I love this question. But I mean, I know not ideal for OP, but I love it because it highlights so many of the misconceptions in MBA applications. So the first one, to go through them in no particular order, the first misconception is this idea that a very senior person is a good thing.
Mm,
It's not necessarily, not unless you've worked very, very closely with them. And
yeah.
OP doesn't actually say whether or not he's worked with them. And in fact, if he's having to write the recommendations for him, which is what's happened here, then it probably is the case that the recommender was not that close to him. So that's one misconception. The other misconception here is that
Hope he did work closely, I think. He does mention
where does it say it?
entrepreneur.
Oh,
Next
who
line.
I work closely with. Okay, I take that back. I take that back. But more, my point being that this who I work closely is way more important than the fact that it's a senior person.
Mhm.
Now, the other misconception is that, and I'm reading between the lines here, but I think OP has written the recommendation for this recommender who he says is very, very busy. I think what's happened is that the recommender has said, sure, I'll submit something, but write it for me. Now,
Mm.
that is a classic case. Everyone thinks, yay, I've got recommenders who say, write it for me. And that's not a good thing because, as we can see, those kinds of recommenders are very inattentive. And this is what happens. So, all of this to say that somebody who is a bit more junior, but has directly managed you and actually likes you is way better than someone senior who's really busy, who's going to submit the wrong recommendation to the wrong school. So, rant over. Let's talk about what OP can actually do here. So, the first thing is there's a few nuanced points here that I'm not entirely sure about. On the one hand, if what's happened is if the recommender has submitted a letter of recommendation, which is one letter without the question headers in it, and it's just one nice long letter that also covers the LOR question for Kellogg, this additional question. And by the way, I have them open here, so I can show you what I mean by this. So this is the Kellogg recommendation letter that OP is referring to. The first question on this list is not asked by other schools, right? How has the candidate engaged with colleagues and clients, stakeholders who held perspectives different from their own? Now, if the recommender has just submitted a letter that has all of these questions like covered in the material, but not written explicitly in bold text, then it just looks like one nice long LOR, and that's not a bad thing at all. However, if OP's LOR has these question headings in it with the text underneath, then it shows very clearly that this was intended for Kellogg, and that is going to be slightly detrimental. That's
Mhm.
going to be detrimental. So TBD, we will see. It'd be really amazing if OP followed up on this and shared their results. I suspect they probably won't, but my suspicion is that all the schools except Kellogg are going to know what's happened. They're not
Mhm.
going to be particularly impressed. And then there's one other thing that might factor here is whether the Kellogg letter of recommendation specifically mentions Kellogg. If it ends with, for example, I think the candidate is really well suited to a Kellogg MBA, and that's been submitted to Columbia, then that is obviously not a good look, and that will be negative. Again, why? Because it shows the recommender has not taken this seriously. It strongly suggests that the letter of recommendation has been written by the applicant. All of these are bad things. Whether it's enough to torpedo the application, it will depend on the rest of the profile, but it's certainly not a good thing. So the key takeaway from here to anybody watching is if the recommender says, yeah, sure, I'll do it, write it for me, that is not necessarily a good thing, especially if they're not going to take it seriously, like the following example. And even worse is if they say, Yeah, sure. I'll send you the link and you submit it for me. The schools can see the IP address that you are submitting the recommendation from. And if that's the same IP address as your application itself, fail.
Mm-hmm.
And then people start saying, yeah, well, I'll use a VPN. And honestly, it's better, just easier and better to just get a recommender who actually likes you, who is actually going to take it seriously, who actually has time and play the games it's meant to be played rather than trying to find shortcuts.
Mm. And in just terms of how much this weight this carries for schools, like, do you think
Mm.
this could torpedo their application completely, or do schools kind of see this and be like, okay, the recommender is busy, they might
Mm.
honest mistake.
Yeah. If there's a second recommendation that's been done really well, right? Some schools have two recommendations. If there's a second one and that's been done really well, having one bad, and also we don't know how bad this is, whether it's
Mm.
an LOR that it clearly says Kellogg, or whether it's, and the rest of it is clearly written by the applicant, that is really negative. But if it's a well-written letter of recommendation that's genuinely been written by the recommender that happens to just cover a little bit of this content in it, then
Mm.
that's not going to be a bad thing, and that's not going to torpedo the application. So there's a little bit of nuance here, but my suspicion is that one of OP's LORs is worth zero or even negative, and yeah, that's going to be detrimental for sure.
Mm. Okay. All right. I
Not
think
ideal.
not ideal, but yeah, that's our roast for today, Sam. That's
Great
our book
stuff.
as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much for digging out all those roasts for those profiles. Thanks for scouring the belly of Reddit, the underbelly, the dirty underbelly of Reddit for these profiles. Reddit can be a nasty place sometimes. So thanks for doing that legwork, and thanks for finding some really interesting profiles. And we will be roasting again next week. And to anybody who's watched, who's enjoyed today's roast, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And also, if you're considering hiring an MBA consultant, myself and the team are here actively taking on clients for round 3 and round 1 next year. So get in touch.
Okay. Thank you,
Great
Sam.
stuff. Now, I'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Cheers.